Happy Monday. Welcome into the CHGO Blackhawks podcast presented by PointsBet. Use promo code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. But make sure with that $50 or more first-time deposit, you remember you'll get that free CHGO membership, which unlocks all of our great web content, and you'll even get a free shirt of your choice like mine from the CHGO locker. So $2,000 in free bets, a free CHGO membership, and a free t-shirt from the CHGO locker, all for placing a $50 or more first-time deposit at PointsBet. And remember, use that code CHGO when you sign up. It is Mailbag Monday. We've got a lot to get to today. Thank you to everybody who got questions into us. Now that the really busy part of the offseason is wrapped up with, free agency, the dust is still settling for the most part, but most of the big names are gone.
And it seems like, from what Kyle Davidson said last week, they're pretty much done.
It feels like the Hawks are pretty much done.
Yeah.
The draft is obviously over. So now we wait for the final names to trickle in via free agency and go from there. So it's just Jay and Mario today. Greg is on vacation. He'll be back on Wednesday. Tomorrow, Top Shelf Tuesday, we're expecting to have Joe Brand in studio with us for the entire show. Max Domi was supposed to meet the media today, but travel issues have postponed that, so hopefully that does not preclude Joe from joining us tomorrow. But one way or another, we'll be here, and we'll be talking Hawks with you. So, Mario, I know you've got a piece coming out soon on allchgo.com, sort of projecting the Blackhawks lineup for next season. So why don't we start there? I know you've put the work in, so I'm going to give you the floor to sort of set things up. And as we start to daydream about the 2022-23 Blackhawks and what the lineup might look like.
Daydream is a
I can't wait.
Soft term to use.
I don't care if they lose. I just want hockey back in my life.
Oh yeah, I'm in the same boat. Yeah, I was going through, thinking draft is over, free agency, the big frenzy of the opening of free agency has come and gone. So now I have a little bit of an idea of what the Blackhawks roster may look like. And now I took a stab at okay, well, where would some of these players slot into a lineup? Like what would a potential lineup look like? So later today, allchgo.com, the full article will be available with lines and just some thoughts on what the team could be. But I was looking at it and, the top line, it's easy to say Max Domi, Patrick Kane, and Jonathan Toews, probably the 3 best players that they have in the forwards group. But for me, I was trying to think of it as okay, what would maximize the spreading out of talent amongst the team? Luke Richardson may completely go the opposite direction. He might be I'm just going to load up my top line, and the rest of the 9 can figure it out. But so I went with Andreas Athanasiou, Jonathan Toews, and Taylor Radish on the top line. Right. Toews and Radish had a little bit of chemistry towards the end of last season. I think it's pretty evident that Jonathan Toews is not the player he used to be, and his speed last season was noticeably slower. And I think adding a player like Athanasiou, who really is a straight line speed kind of player, could really make a difference for Toews to play alongside. And it gives an opportunity for a player like Athanasiou, who, let's face it, he's going to be here for 2/3 of the season. Gives him an opportunity to play with a guy like Jonathan Toews to potentially up his value as the trade deadline approaches. The second line I went with was Patrick Kane, Max Domi, and Lucas Reichel between the two of them. I think
fun line.
I think that is probably the most skilled and probably the most highlight worthy line. I know, quote unquote, highlight worthy. We're grasping at straws here, but I just think it's. I think Domi and Kane could play well together because as much as a pud as Domi can be on the ice, he's still a very skilled player, and Patrick Kane obviously thrives playing with other skilled players, not on the same level as him, but someone who could match that. And I think Reichel is another player who could pair well with those guys. Yeah. And it's a lot of pressure and expectation to put on him going into a full season as a 20-year-old. But my reasoning is, where else are you going to play him?
Yeah.
If you want him to be a center, you need to give him the opportunity to sink or swim as a center. And if you want to really give him a successful chance at swimming, put him with two very good, skilled veterans and allow him to figure it out in that kind of setting.
I also think doing that is going to get him points. Patrick Kane is a point creator. I retweeted something from hockey analyst Jay Fresh yesterday, and Max Domi is an elite playmaker. So you put him with those two guys, and the points are going to start to come for Reichel, which I think, in a young player, especially someone who is very offense first like Lucas Reichel, if his career starts with a lot of blank score sheets, those are the sort of things that can maybe start to sink into the confidence a little bit. If he's on a line with Domi and with Kane, those points are going to come just kind of by osmosis. He's going to be on the ice with two guys that pick up points. He's going to be touching the puck a lot as that center. So I think I really like that idea. I'm also very excited about watching that line play. My only fear is who's going in the corner to get the pucks. I guess that would be Domi, would be the more physical of the three. But sign me up. That you said that, I'm like, that's an exciting line to watch.
Physically imposing is not that line's number one number one trait. But I think it's a line that not every line, especially on this team, is going to check all the boxes of like someone who's a good two-way guy, goes into the corners, plays physical, one guy that is a sniper, and one guy who can distribute the puck wherever. Like not every line is going to be able to do that. Maybe one line can do that. Like I think the theme of the rest of this offseason and going into this upcoming season is going to be make sure your expectations are tempered, and that way you're not going to raise your blood pressure over this team. And my other point about Lucas Reichel is that this will now be his fourth professional season that he's played. He played most of last season in the AHL, had about 15 games with the Blackhawks at the NHL level. He played 2 seasons in Germany in the professional ranks, which again is not the NHL. It's not even the AHL, but it's still, he's a 17, 18-year-old kid playing against men in that league. A lot of former NHL players play in that league as well. So it's not like you're taking an 18-year-old kid going from junior to the NHL and playing him in the top 6. You're taking a guy who has had some time to develop, and I think having a little bit of higher expectations for Lucas Reichel is okay. I know we're preaching patience and development and not pushing guys before they're ready, but I think with Lucas Reichel, there is enough there that I can say, like, you know what? You can start him fast and pull him back, right? And not really. I don't think there's going to be too much of a worry of like, oh shoot, like he's not ready to go. If it is, send him to Rockford. There's really nothing to lose at that point if you want to say like, you know what, we need to pull it back. We did it with Ian Mitchell, and now Ian Mitchell going into this season has an opportunity to hold a lineup spot.
That's a real good point. When we had Derek King in studio a couple months ago, he mentioned that putting someone down in the minors doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bust or they're a disappointment or whatever. Sometimes you just need to zoom out and go focus on something specific, right? And sending guys down, it doesn't necessarily mean they're never ever going to be NHL grade players. So if Lucas Reichel finds himself down in Rockford a couple times this year just to hone some skills, work on some particular things, it's not the end of the world. There's no reason to panic. There's no reason to label him a bust. Like you said, the Hawks have been preaching patience. They've been preaching development, which is what we've wanted for years, and they've never shown it. Every big prospect they've had, they have rushed, right? Jokiharju, Boquist, even to some point, Teuvo Teravainen was a little bit rushed. Yeah. Not as much as the others. Kirby Dach, obviously. The list goes on and on of guys who are just not ready for the NHL that were brought up here for reasons. I don't know. and now Reichel is like the one guy, and I do feel like if he who shall not be named was the GM for the entirety of last season, that Lucas Reichel probably would have played the whole year in Chicago or the vast majority
of it. Yeah. It would have been flipped how much he played in the AHL to the NHL. Yeah. He would have played mostly in the NHL.
So I'm very happy that Kyle Davidson and seemingly Luke Richardson understand that development takes time. It's also not linear. We're going to say that a lot. It's not just a straight line up. There's going to be peaks and valleys in anyone's development. Lucas Reichel's no different.
Well, and you mentioned Jokiharju, you mentioned Boquist, another guy who went through that and is no longer around, but probably benefited from that was Nick Schmaltz. He was kind of floundering with the Blackhawks at different times, went to Rockford, had a decent stretch there and kind of maybe reconfigured what he was doing at that time, got back to the NHL level, was a pretty productive player, and then so far being in Arizona, he's been fine. He's been fine. Yeah. He hasn't had to, he hasn't looked like a bust, and he hasn't been a superstar, but he's been doing pretty well.
I think that's part of it too. When and hopefully this is what happens for Kirby Dach, and Hunter in the chat points out Ryan Hartman. When you move from the team that drafted you, that had these incredibly high expectations for you, the pressure to become a superstar is off a little bit. And I think the same can be said for Dylan Strome, picked 3rd overall. By the way, if you missed it, Dylan Strome, Washington Capitol. Congratulations to Dylan Strome on his contract. We're going to get to that in Mailbag Monday a little bit. But like moving from that team that drafted you with those high expectations, even with Dach going to Montreal, Canadiens fans aren't expecting Kirby Dach to be the next franchise center of the Canadiens. They're hoping that he'll be a really solid second or third line center or winger, and I think that's very attainable for Kirby.
A trip down Habs Twitter will will show you the expectations that they have. They are still high for Kirby Dach. I think a lot of Canadiens fans are talking themselves into he's a reclamation project, and the expectation is that he will be rebuilt in Montreal. So I mean, but the thing is, he's 21 and he was put into a situation where he had a ton of road of speed bumps in his development. So yes, a change of scenery, maybe a change of expectation, a little bit at least, will do him well. Yeah, I think Dach definitely could be a player like that where, it just needs to be a reset, and having that early in your career rather than being 27 or 28 needing a reset. The expectations for you to bounce back are pretty good. Check out the full article on allchgo.com later today. I don't want to go through every line here, but I'll give the highlights of the defense. I did have Alex Vlasic and Alec Regula in the lineup. Pretty much the defensive rotation, the top 4. I had the same as it ended last season. Connor Murphy and Jake McCabe in the second pairing, Seth Jones and Vlasic on the top. But the bottom pair, literally you could take 9 names, throw them at the wall, and whatever 2 stick, there's your bottom pair. Like literally, there's so many guys in the mix that could be playing, that third pairing on the defensive. In the defensive lineup for the Blackhawks. It's just, and I expect it to be a blender this season.
It should be.
Which it's fine. Yeah. Unless 2 solid players say, no, we're NHL lineup regulars. Yeah. Rotate the guys you have, mix it up and see what some of those prospects can do. The bottom 6 of the forward group, not a ton. Colin Blackwell's in there. He's a recent signee. Tyler Johnson and Sam Lafferty I have on the third line paired together. And then the goaltenders, Mrazek, Stalock, Soderblom, Stauber, 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right. Yeah, don't give the whole thing away. You want the rest, allchgo.com later this afternoon. Make sure you do it. And Region Rev is doing my job for me. Smash the like button. I always forget to say this when we start the podcast. We've got like 70 people at least watching right now on YouTube.
What's up, guys?
All 70 of you, please hit that like button right now. I'll pause. Okay, thanks a lot for doing that. We appreciate it.
Wow, look at all those likes.
That's always incredibly helpful for us and for all of CHGO. You see a live video or any video, click on it, hit that like button. It's super, super helpful. So make sure you do that for us.
Shout out to the people who stopped by during Prospect Camp last week. Said hi. Met Skokes on Friday. Good guy. Always in the chat. He is not Greg's burner account. He's a real person.
Yeah, he's a real, or claims to be anyway.
They just happen to live in the same neighborhood and have gone to the same high school. But yeah, shout out to Sean Skokes and everyone else that came out and said hi. Last week was a lot of fun. I am looking forward to getting back to a regular schedule here at CHGO for the rest of the summer. And I'm just waiting on that Phil Kessel announcement. Just waiting on it.
Yes.
I'm joking, everyone.
Indeed.
Please. Take a breath, go outside, take a walk around your block. It's fine. I'm not actually advocating for Phil Kessel to be signed by the Blackhawks. Yes, I am.
If I just put on a Phil Kessel jersey, would you know the difference? That's the question.
We have Phil Kessel in studio.
Phil Kessel in studio. Hey, You can't prove I'm not Phil Kessel.
Anyway, what's up, guys?
Prospects Camp was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The scrimmage Friday was good.
I am so glad they changed it to a 5-on-5.
That
so
was
glad.
cool. And if you were there and you're like, wow, this is sloppy, keep in mind, like, no systems have been put into place yet. It's basically it's a rat hockey
That is
game.
essentially a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds going, all right, let's go play.
Yeah, exactly. But the good news, and if you listen, by the way, if you missed it, Friday's episode, we wrap up Prospects Camp, and we shared our interviews with Frank Nazar, Drew Comesso, Ethan Del Mastro, and Nolan Allen. Really good stuff. We hope you enjoyed that. If you've not listened, make sure you do. And all those videos are available on YouTube, all those interviews individually. You can watch Frank Nazar juggle. And
pucks.
man, I think it might have been Ben Pope that wrote it, that he's already got Frank Nazar as the Hawks' #1 prospect based on camp alone. And it's really hard to argue with that because that dude, he looks so good. He looks so good. Yeah. I was really impressed with him. But everybody that you can project as NHLers, from Nazar and Korchinski, Nolan Allen, Samuel Savoie, I almost said Savoy again. All those guys look the part. There was never a moment where you were like, ooh, I don't see an NHLer there. Yeah. And that was kind of the thought maybe with Nolan Allen a little bit when he was drafted. But you see him on the ice, he's never going to be a big point producer.
No,
it's just not his game.
No, I think his game is going to be like a shutdown defensive defenseman.
If he maxes out as Connor Murphy, that's a solid pick.
Yeah, Connor Murphy was a first-round pick.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, the thought was that Allen was a stretch last, not this past draft, but the 2021 draft. But yeah, I think he's still got the makings of being a solid player. Obviously, there's still time to figure things out. He's going to go back to junior again this season. Yeah, all those guys were great to talk to, and yeah, Nazar. We mentioned it in our prospect camp wrap up post, which you can see at allchgo.com. A little notebook about all the things going on throughout the week. You know, it's redundant. The best players look like the best players, but that's
good.
That's what you want to see. You don't want to come away thinking, we might have some trouble on our hands or anything like that.
You don't want to see Frank Nazar get shut down by a camp invite.
Right, yeah, that would be that would be the worst case scenario. But yeah, he looked really good. I think to call him the best prospect, I mean, you basically just have to say, is he better than Lucas Reichel right now? We'll have to see. I definitely am going to be following what he does at Michigan this season pretty closely, just to kind of see how he's panning out at the college game, and take it from there. I think based on projections, yeah, he's probably projected to be maybe a more of a lock to be a top 6 player in the NHL than Lucas Reichel might be at this time. But there's a lot of time to see how things pan out. But I think that it's the right first steps for some of these first-round guys.
And I'll say, too, before we get to Mailbag Monday, a lot of these guys are very far away from the NHL, including Nazar, who's probably, at best,
3 years? Maybe, yeah, 2-3 years.
Yeah, so it's not going to happen anytime
to be
soon.
Safe, basically, you know?
If
he wants to play 2 seasons, 3 seasons at Michigan, no problem with that. If that's the plan, to make sure that when he is ready to make the jump, he is ready to go. I think that's probably in the best interest of the Hawks.
All right, Mailbag Monday time. But first, got to remind you, the best way to support us here at CHGO is to download that PointsBet app. And when you do, use that promo code CHGO. It's over that way. See it? There you go. I pointed correctly. Very proud of myself. Boom. You'll get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000 when you use that code CHGO. You're also, with a $50 or more first-time deposit, going to get that free CHGO membership. That unlocks our awesome web content, including Mario's upcoming piece from later today. You'll get access to our Discord page, which gets priority on Mailbag Monday, as you're about to find out. And free shirt from the CHGO locker, like my Blackhawks one here. Every team is represented. My wife and I were on the town yesterday. I was wearing my CHGO Bulls. She was wearing her CHGO Sky. Nice. We were dorks, but it was cool because they're both awesome shirts. So $2,000 in free bets, a free CHGO membership, and a free t-shirt from the CHGO locker. All that for making a $50 or more first-time deposit at PointsBet. It's your home for live in-play betting. What does that mean? You're watching the Cubs game. They're winning by 2. you know they're going to lose. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. They're going to lose the game. You bet that the Cubs are going to lose despite their lead. That is in-play betting, okay? I'm a Cubs fan. I can make these jokes. I'm allowed to do it. I have suffered along. The game Thursday, the Cubs lost 8-0. It was very nice to be at a game I wasn't invested in. I was like, oh, look at that. There goes another double. Oh, look at Pete Alonso just hit the scoreboard. Sweet. This is a lot of fun. This hot dog is delicious. Yeah, bet along with the game on PointsBet. It's a great time, and it keeps you invested in games that don't matter.
There you go.
And we've got a lot of those happening around town lately. So what are you waiting for? It's time to elevate your live betting game. Once the game starts, don't just bet. Live your bet life with PointsBet. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER for crisis counseling and referral services.
And another good way to support us at CHGO and to support yourself is to go try some OWYN. OWYN stands for only what you need. What is OWYN, you may be asking yourself? Well, I'll tell you. OWYN is a 100% plant-based protein shake that gives you the nutrition that works just as hard as you do. All of OWYN's products are free of artificial ingredients. They are allergen-friendly. They don't contain any gluten or dairy and are easily digestible. You may have heard about OWYN from Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields, who follows a plant-based diet. And right now, OWYN and CHGO are partnering up to give you an awesome offer. You can get 20% off of your first purchase at liveowyn.com when you use the promo code CHGO20. That's 20% off of your first purchase at liveowyn.com using the promo code CHGO20. I've tried OWYN. It tastes great. It helps me during my workouts. The recovery time when you're my age and have played the sports that I have, just little humble brag there.
Your age.
Well-oiled machine, top athlete, elite hashtag. It helps with the recovery time for sure. And I myself try and cut out gluten and dairy as much as possible, so it's perfect for that. So join me, elite athlete, and Justin Fields, elite athlete.
Also Justin Fields.
And try some OWYN. Again, that's OWYN, only what you need.
All right, let's get to it. Mailbag Monday. If you ever want to get involved in Mailbag Monday, use our very lonely email account, Blackhawks at allchgo.com. There's nothing in there. It's sad. Send us an email. But the easiest way is to hit us up on Discord or to send us a tweet at CHGO_Blackhawks.
No postage needed.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, so the first one, as I said, our Discord channel gets priority. So Sunghyung86 says, realistically speaking, what would the best offer from a contender for Patrick Kane end up looking like in the offseason or by the trade deadline? Well, it's going to be the deadline. Well, not the deadline. It would be the in-season or the deadline.
By all accounts, yeah.
I think...
Should we pick a contender to maybe use as an example?
I like that idea.
Are the Rangers?
I think the Rangers are. It is a rumor that will not go away. It's very tough to elude
Sean's
the Rangers.
Got one.
In this
Kane to Vegas for Eichel.
No.
Oh, it's a joke. Oh,
I don't want Eichel anymore.
Yeah, no. Pass.
Too much
Jack
bad
Eichel.
News. All right, so
bad news. So Rangers.
Let's do this real quick. Rangers for sure. So last night I was kind of doing some research because I saw this question and wanted to have my ducks in a row to answer it. So you're talking about a unrestricted free agent. And I think it's fair to say Patrick Kane, despite his age, is still in his prime.
It's an elite postseason rental.
Yes, exactly. So as I'm going through this list of deadline transactions for players of that status, the one I found that struck me as the most similar was when the Atlanta Thrashers traded Marian Hossa to the Pittsburgh Penguins for the 2008 Cup run. So the Penguins really fleeced the Thrashers on this one, by the way.
Yes, they did.
Hossa and Pascal Dupuis for Colby Armstrong, Eric Christensen, prospect Angelo Esposito, and a first-round pick in the 2008 draft. So that was the return for Hossa and Dupuis. Colby Armstrong, who was at the time a pretty highly touted young player, people thought was going to be better than he ended up being.
Yeah.
Eric Christensen, I don't have too much of a memory on. Angelo Esposito was a pretty high prospect and a first-round pick. So I think it's fair to say there's no way they're moving Kane without getting a first back. The conversation begins with the first-round pick. That's when Kyle Davidson begins to return the texts.
The pick made by the Atlanta Thrashers in that trade, that following draft, The vaunted Dalton Lavelle.
Oh, God.
Dalton Lavelle.
I've never even heard that name.
I don't blame you.
Dalton Lavelle?
He was drafted out of the Greater Ontario Junior Hockey League. Played 4 seasons at Michigan State before having an AHL and ECHL career that spanned over 200 combined games. So Dalton Lavelle. Yeah, okay. So for the Thrashers, it did not pan out the way that they had hoped.
What?
But
everything had gone so well for the Thrashers.
That is but that is the risk you run in these kinds of deals when and that is the assumed risk that the Blackhawks are taking this offseason with everything that they've done so far by trading Alex DeBrincat, by trading Kirby Dach. What they're doing is basically taking a big scoop of the maybe pile and hoping that by the time that they get to the table and dump out the maybes, a couple of them stick and a couple of them turn out to be as good or potentially better than what Alex DeBrincat and Kirby Dach could bring to the table. Plus, that's going to keep churning. With Patrick Kane, what you're hoping is to get a big handful of the maybes and get one or two that stick. Sometimes you might get nothing that sticks. Sometimes you might get 2 or 3 that turn out, and you might say, hey, we actually want to trade. So I think with Kane, it's even as a rental, it's still going to be a pretty significant haul of maybes and future assets. If they can get a first-round pick, if we're talking about the Rangers, if they can get a first-round pick, 1 or 2 of their like upper-level prospects, I think that's probably best-case scenario you can go with. If they, we were talking about it before the show. Who is this roster's Pasquale Dupuis? And we were like,
Athanasiou was mine.
Athanasiou, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, it would be a player that you add to it. Maybe you get an extra little thing in the deal, a 4th-round pick, whatever it is.
Well, look, a team that's looking to load up might want more than just Patrick Kane.
Right.
And, I mean, honestly, there is a scenario where you could do Kane and Toews to a team and just get a massive return.
Oh, my God.
Because think about
You'd
this,
have to
right?
have like a 4-way trade with all that salary retention.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, like, by that time of the year, the salary is lower because it does prorate.
It's actual dollars, yeah.
Exactly. And then, yes, the Hawks could take on half the money, and that's not even a consideration for them. So whichever team would be bringing those guys in is going to do it for a song. We'll just talk about is one trade at a time right now, right? Just for simplicity. But for Patrick Kane, every team that's contending is going to want to bring in Patrick Kane at half the cost at the end of the season. It is a no-brainer. And people are going to do their maneuvering. Like, let's put somebody on an LTIR, rest them up for the playoffs. Maybe Nikita Kucherov goes down for a little while again, and the Lightning find room for Patrick Kane. You know, like, there's always those sort of scenarios. So you've got to find teams with picks and prospects you like, and you basically just say, beat the offer.
And we knew that a team like Colorado was seriously trying to think about, okay, like, what can we do to get a Patrick Kane trade to work? And Colorado was already loaded. So it's just like you look at it, there's no team that's in contention at the trade deadline that would say, nah, we're good, we don't need Patrick Kane. Things can be teams can get creative, and it seems like Kyle Davidson is very open to creativity.
Yeah, and the Rangers, this is interesting to me, is you've got Capo Caco, you've got Lafreniere. I can never say his name right.
Alexis Lafreniere.
That's I said it right.
Pretty good. Yeah.
I don't know if Lafreniere is on the table, but Caco, if he's a restricted free agent right now, he doesn't have a contract at the moment, but I don't know, like, would you be willing to take on one of those two guys instead of trading for a first? Right? Would you take...
I mean, that's a former first overall and former second overall.
And Lafreniere was considered almost like a Bedard-level prospect, right? Like a can't-miss number 1 overall. Everyone knew he was going to be number 1 overall.
He was
maybe
like
a Shane Wright.
He was like a Shane Wright who didn't fall to 4th.
Right, yeah, exactly.
He was like a Shane Wright that everyone didn't talk themselves out of. But yeah, still a very talented player. Likely will play in a top 6 role once he's reached the peak of his career. Same with Caco. I think if you substitute the 1st-round pick for a player like that, because you're thinking about it, if a team like the Rangers or any contender is giving up their first-round pick. It's a late first-round pick. Even if they get bounced in the first round, it's probably in the late teens. So if you're saying like a former second overall or first overall player with that kind of talent level, you might value that a little bit better than a pick that could, if Patrick Kane were to go to the Rangers, like you're looking at a team that, as currently constructed, and adding him to the mix, you're kind of looking at like, hey, this first round pick that we're getting back might be mid to late 20s or in the 30s. Like, you might value that already NHL ready top talent more than a future maybe, especially a late first round. It might be more valuable to take the guy who's ready to go.
So Brandon with a $5 super chat. Thanks, Brandon. Says, can you both talk about the potential teams in which you think both Kane could waive and go to, even Jonathan Toews? I think when you saw Marc-Andre Fleury is a good case study. That was a guy who wrestled with the idea of coming to the Hawks, ultimately agreed and said, the thought was maybe he would retire and said, come to me at the deadline and we'll talk. And he ended up going to Minnesota. It's kind of hard to like make a list right now because the season hasn't began. But as we get closer to the deadline, you're going to see which teams are true contenders. Every year, there's a team that falls off for seemingly no reason, and every year there's a team that is way better than anyone thinks, right? So it's hard to say, but I don't see like if, I don't know, the Florida Panthers are good again and a piece away, right? Like they thought they were with Claude Giroux.
Right.
Go and they say to Jonathan Toews, would you go play in Florida for 2 months? I can't see him saying no to that. If he agrees to be traded, I don't think any of the like likely playoff teams we're talking about would be no's for him.
Right.
Even like when you think about the markets where guys are like, I don't want to play there, that's usually Winnipeg because it sucks. The weather's terrible. It's this tiny little town. That's where he's from. So I really don't see a team where Jonathan Toews would say, absolutely not, I'm never playing for this team.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at it too, these trades, if they are to happen, are most likely going to be in season or at the deadline. So these guys aren't committing to a full 82 game schedule in Winnipeg or in New York or Buffalo or Nashville or whatever. Like they're not committing to that. They're going to play at least 2/3 of the season in Chicago with this team and in the life that they know. So it's not, you're not making a big leap. You're not, looking to buy a house wherever you're getting traded to. You're just moving a box of your stuff to an apartment that you rent for 2 months, trying to win a Stanley Cup. So it's not as big of a deal as making a full season commitment or thinking of signing an extension there. Now they could run into a situation where Patrick Kane goes to New York, potentially. They have a great run with him there. Maybe they win a cup. I don't know. And then he says, you know what, I'm gonna stay in New York, or I'm gonna stay wherever I end up going. That could also happen. But yeah, I think as the season goes on, we will get a clearer picture of the haves and have-nots in the league. And I think from that point on, then you can start to kind of pick and choose, all right, where are some connections that these guys have, whether it's former teammates or former coaches or what have you. And you start to look at what fits best between the two teams. Like there's going to be some teams this year that are contenders that have a prospect pool that is wiped out, and you're like, I don't care about anything you have to give to me besides picks.
If the Blackhawks were trying to trade for Jonathan Toews or Patrick Kane,
it wouldn't
We'll
work.
give you Isaac Phillips and a
bunch of our firsts.
Yeah, it's not
our late round firsts.
Right. The other thing, just real quick to keep in mind here, before I forget to say it in my old brain, usually what happens in these cases is the general manager will speak to another GM. That GM will make an offer. Then the GM will go to the player and say, we've got an offer from Florida. This is the best offer we have. Would you accept the trade to Florida? Or the GM goes to the player with, these are the 3 teams we're dealing with. These are the 3 that have offered us the best potential. In order, where would you like to go? And I do think, as hard as this pill is to swallow for Hawks fans, the Hawks should accommodate where those guys want to go. I think Kane and Toews have earned the right to say, don't just trade me for the biggest return. I'd rather go to Tampa than to Minnesota. So if it's a little bit less of a package, then trade me to Tampa and not Minnesota. I think they do owe them that, as long as it's not an egregious difference in return.
Yeah.
I do think that is something that should be considered and might be.
Well, and they have that built into their contracts. If they don't want to go anywhere, Cal Davidson say, "Well, screw you, I'm making this trade," and they say, "No, you're not.
No, you're not."
They
exactly.
have the ability to do that, and I think too what Davidson has said is, he's not going to ask them to waive, I guess technically, but what you're saying is correct. GMs are always talking, always thinking of these kinds of moves, and whether they ever come to fruition or are public or whatever is a different story. But those conversations are always happening, whether they say we're not trading these guys or not. Those are always happening. But I think what Davidson is saying is that he's not going to actively ship them out of town unless they say, hey, you can throw my name out there.
All right, let's get one from the chat here. This one's from Narfin. He says, if I'm allowed to contribute to Mailbag Monday from the chat,
yes.
Do you guys have any other podcasts that are good to check out for hockey? Love your show and started listening to 32 Thoughts and like it. 32 Thoughts is my
Just
go-to.
listen to us.
Just us, yeah.
We're all you need.
Yeah. For me,
No,
32 Thoughts is the go-to for like insider scoops and what might be happening.
Yeah. 32 Thoughts.
People
with
love
Elliot
Spittin'
Friedman.
Chicklets. If you can stomach the company that is published by, no judgment either way. Whatever you're comfortable with. I will listen to that for player interviews because players get really candid with those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I still reference a Duncan Keith interview from like October of 2019 or something that they had where he really opened up to them about Jeremy Colleton and Joel Quenneville, like the difference between those two. It's something I think about all the time. So that's one if you're into that. There's a lot. It's just kind of whatever you're looking for. There's a lot of good Hawks ones.
I believe it's the Daily Faceoff Rundown or Daily Faceoff Live. I can't remember which one it is, but the one that Frank Saravalli is always on is a good one too. Any podcast where Frank Saravalli or Elliot Friedman are the head guys, that's where you're going to get a lot of good information, a lot of good talk, league-wide, not just team specific, league-wide. Those are two really good ones to check out. And
Puck Soup is pretty good.
I'm missing one. I can't remember.
There's a bunch.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there.
It's like all podcasts, like whatever sort of tempo you're into.
There's so many different flavors of podcasts that you could try out and see which one fits. Hopefully you like the flavor of the CHGO Blackhawks podcast and keep coming back to us. But yeah, if you want to go listen to 32 Thoughts as well, that's totally fine. We do the same thing.
All right, let's go to the Twitter questions. This one's from Dan H. Is there anyone left on the free agent market, Kessel not included, that you would add to the Blackhawks?
Damn, Dan, why you got to be like that?
Honestly,
no.
not really.
No. When Kyle Davison was like, we're pretty much done, I was like, yep, that checks out.
Yeah, I think Athanasiou and Domi and Blackwell kind of like accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. They fill out the roster with NHL pros. All three of them are very easy to move. It feels like Blackwell is a little longer-term investment for the Hawks. Like they actually kind of like him and want him around.
2 years long-term.
Yeah, but I think that exactly what we talked about going into free agency, look for them to pick up pieces they can flip at the deadline. They've done that. They've gotten probably better ones than I expected them to get. Mm-hmm. I didn't think Athanasiou or Domi would be interested in coming here and betting on themselves.
No, to get both of those guys through free agency was impressive for the goal of short-term flippable.
Yeah. But I think we should temper expectations too on both those guys. I think it's very unlikely they get no way either returns a first-round draft pick. That's out of the question. You're talking about like a mid-level prospect or a third-round pick maybe at best. But again,
maybe you get 2/3 or something like that. Or
yeah,
like
I don't see
it.
Yeah, I don't see a huge return coming for either of those guys. But again, you're basically just paying money to gain some assets at the deadline, whatever they might be, and it's just savvy. You need guys to fill out the roster. They've done that. Maybe they do the same thing next year. 2 more free agents for a couple $1 million, and they fill out a spot. Do it again. It is how you acquire assets. So no, I'm not really interested in bringing anyone else in because you don't want them to get too competitive. That would be a big problem.
Well, and as far as the lineup goes, they have enough spots where you're playing kind of the younger players that you're thinking, oh, they might turn into something. And enough spots are taken up by the already in place veterans or the free agents added. You have your two goalies. Like, there's really no other spot in the lineup where you could like, oh, we need to, plug in a player here. It's pretty much what they have right now. And then the next tier of guys that are like between the AHL and the NHL, I think those are their guys. I think those are their players going into the season, and that's going to be what it's going to be. Now, the roster could go through some changes. There could be some injuries. There could be some trades that still happen late in the offseason. We don't know. But I think as far as going back to the free agency pool, I think it's over.
Agreed. All right, next up, I think we have JM, right? Is that right, Kevin? That's our next question from Twitter. Is the Adam Clendening deal official? Haven't heard anything since it was first reported. Any word on David Gust to Rockford? Clendening was made official this morning.
Made official this morning. He is on an AHL deal. David Gust, I have not heard anything new on that. That was a few days ago. I talked to two people who I trust with that information, and they said that their sense was that Gust would be coming from the Chicago Wolves, staying in the area, and going to the Rockford Ice Hogs. That hasn't had any movement since then, but again, that's going to be a minor league contract. Those things, sometimes those don't happen until later in the summer. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to see Clendening back. I think he fills a need. We've talked about it a little bit last week. He fills a need that the Ice Hogs were looking that the Blackhawks were looking to fill with the Ice Hogs, and that's to have some more competitive veterans to play along with the young players. Clendening is one of the most decorated AHL players in recent years, not only for the Blackhawks, but for other teams as well. He was a great player to have in the locker room. They brought him back for the 2018 playoff run for the Ice Hogs. So yeah, I think he's going to play a minor league role. He's going to play a leadership role with that group, and I think that's a good thing for that young group in Rockford to do. I don't think you have to worry about Clendening coming up to the NHL. I don't think that's at all in the plans. He should be in the AHL the entire season.
All right, let's go back to the chat. Got one here from No Roids Just Rage. He says, I heard potential Avs acquiring Kane for Newhook, Byram, and a first.
Yeah, sign me up.
Yes, absolutely make that trade. But I'll tell you, there's nothing that you're hearing in terms of names and picks is real yet. Patrick Kane is going to start the season in Chicago. The Avs and Hawks don't just have that trade sitting on the table. If it was sitting on the table, it'd be done.
Right.
They would make that trade now and execute it, and why not? Like, why would the Hawks not make that trade today?
Yeah.
And same for the Avalanche. Why would they not want to start the season with Patrick Kane?
If that was on the table, if that was really being talked about, the Hawks would be making that trade right away as long as Kane wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Because if you say, oh, okay, well, we'll talk later on the season. Oh, like, knock on wood. Oh, Patrick Kane just blew out his knee. Crap. Then what? Then you're sitting on nothing. You have no first. You have no Byram. You have no Newhook. If that's the deal, you make the deal as long as Kane wants to do it. Yeah, and you would make it immediately.
Anything you see with names tied to it right now is pure speculation, pure click generation, like we talked about last week.
Unless it's coming from those
verified
sources that we were talking about last week
Friedman,
and earlier
Saravalli.
today. Yeah, Saravalli, Friedman, LeBrun, like all those guys, or like from local beats. You know, if that's where it's coming from, you can take a little bit of salt from it. If not,
or like, Jay Zawaski.
Sure.
Or
but like hockey rumors on Facebook is not going to give you. They're not going to be the first ones to have a
NHL rumor source.uk.
So that's the thing. Like, think about the source. Like, is this the kind of place that would have this story before any of the insiders would? Of course not.
Right.
Of course not. So just use your common sense. I know we get like swept up in this stuff, but we're all guilty of it. But like, just if you see the source and you don't see it anywhere else, unless it's one of those verified people. Bobby Margarita, our favorite, Friedman, whoever, the list goes on and on. You know who these people are. You know the people, Pierre LeBrun, the ones who do it for a living. If they don't verify it immediately or very, very soon after, it's just BS. It's just trying to... I could publish something on allchgo.com and say, I know the trade package for I know what the Hawks are going to trade Patrick Kane for, and just put it out there. It's going to generate 1 million clicks and be shared 1 million times, because a lot of people can't. We know this now more than ever, that people can't discern what is actual news and what isn't. Mm-hmm. So just be careful. Just use common sense when going through these things. All right, back to the Twitter page from Brian M. Based on the healthy conversations between Kane, Toews, and management, what is the likely scenario this year with them and their status on staying or going? Personally, I would love Kane to stay and break records, all while building a winning culture. I don't know how I feel on Toews yet. I think they're both going to go. I think they're both going to go at the deadline. And as cool as it would be to see Patrick Kane break all the Hawks records, it doesn't really help them in the rebuild. Right. I think I just want to see maximum return for both guys. Wish them well. Have the nice little final send-off home game before the deadline where it's kind of the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We know this is going to happen kind of a thing, and go from there. It's the best thing for the team. It's going to be painful. It's absolutely going to be painful to see those guys go, but it doesn't take away all the stuff they accomplished here. The cups are still here. Everything still happened with them playing elsewhere. I think what you got to do, like they did with DeBrincat, you got to just tear the Band-Aid off. It's going to be painful as hell, but just get it done. Get the maximum return and get back to winning consistently again. Yeah,
I think as far as their status with the new management, with the new coaching staff, I think the goal that the front office and the coaching staff had was, let's see if they're in to at least see how things play out. And I think that's the sense that has been given so far, is that both Toews and Kane and Seth Jones to another extent, they are in to see how the season plays out. And I think the probably agreement is, like Jay said, they'll play this season up until the trade deadline. They'll have their like pseudo farewell tour, which will be weird, but in the grand scheme of things, the best route to get to the bottom so that you can get back to the top and do it the right way is to not hold on to things, to just kind of hold on to them. If you love something, let it go, right?
Yep.
So I think Toews and Kane will not only start the season with the Blackhawks, they will play the majority of the season with the Blackhawks, and I still feel a little not 100% that Patrick Kane will want out, but it's not a 50-50 call with me. I still feel like he is probably, I would lean that he is going to be moved at the deadline. Toews, I feel like is more, I feel more certain that he will move by the deadline.
All right, let's go to Chad from the Twitter account here on Mailbag Monday. He's got a two-part question. So the first one says, do the Hawks have problems with leaks in the front office? We had the Dubas concern, which I mostly disregard, but then we were told part of the reason for the low return on the Cat trade was that other teams knew they were motivated to move him than they let on. And then he follows up with the second part. He says, finally, the entire league seemed to know Kubalik and Strome could be had for free by waiting, whereas other teams don't seem to have the same problem getting something for RFAs at the trade deadline. Thanks for the great show. So I think the DeBrincat thing, you got to remember how engaged agents are in trade discussions, right? This is not just like agents are heavily involved in these things these days. And I think it became abundantly clear that whoever was trading for Alex DeBrincat was not going to get a sign and trade. And I think when the conversations began, a lot of teams thought like, well, maybe we can, sign him to the extension and bring him in. Alex DeBrincat wants to explore free agency.
Yeah,
he wants to. He's not interested in, just signing with Ottawa or whoever would have traded for him.
He wasn't signing up for 8 years in Ottawa or New Jersey.
So that scared a lot of teams away, and that's the agent talking. So before Pierre Dorian makes a trade with Chicago, he's going to call Alex DeBrincat's agent and say, hey, we're working on this. Do you see this as a potential place where he'd be willing to sign long-term? The agent either already knows or reaches out to DeBrincat and says, hey, we're talking to Ottawa. Is that a team that you would consider signing with right now? Alex says yes or no. And these things are very fluid. It is not just between GM and GM. The agents play a giant role. Mm-hmm. And yes, that is sometimes how the leaks happen, is agents talk to sources.
Yep.
Sources get things out for them. And sometimes, too, like, you'll see teams let things out, and drive up demand on a player and say, oh, the return for DeBrincat is multiple firsts. Sometimes that works in your favor. I'm not saying this happened, but just as an example, sometimes it drives up interest and it starts a bidding war. Sometimes it scares teams away. Mm-hmm. So maybe these are some of the learning steps that Kyle Davidson needs to learn, is how to negotiate those waters, right? And letting things out a little bit. Talk about what sort of offers they're getting, because they know who talks. Mm. They know who they can say things to that's going to get it out in the media in such a way that they want it to. So there's a whole game involved in the whole thing. So you got to keep that in mind all the time. Yeah,
and I think to address the Strome and Kubalik parts of the question there from Chad, Dylan Strome was on the trade block for, a year and a half? And there was no trade offers to be had, or none that made sense.
6th-round pick was the biggest offer.
6th-round pick for his RFA rights was the best offer that we understand that the Blackhawks had on the table for him. And I think one thing Kyle Davidson is doing is saying, you know what, we're not just going to ship you for a late round pick just for the heck of it. We're going to allow, Davidson saying we're going to allow Dylan to kind of figure out where he wants to go on his own. The contracts that they got, I don't think you can really be mad at it, because if you look, if a 6th-round pick is all that you were going to get for his RFA rights, a team is on the free agency market is not going to say, oh, well, then let's just shovel $4.5 million at him if they knew that they could have got him for a 6th-round pick. The expectations of the deal decrease at that point. So Kubalik signing cheaper than his qualifying offer. Dylan Strome signing cheaper than his qualifying offer. I don't get why people around the league don't think Dylan Strome is a solid middle of the year lineup centerman. I think he's proved that on 2 occasions with the Blackhawks that he can do it. For Kubalik, I think he just had back-to-back down underperforming seasons, so it's a cheaper deal was to be expected. But pounding your fists and being mad that the Blackhawks couldn't get them for those same deals, I think at that point you're just saying, you know what, it's not going to work out with Kubalik, it's not going to work out with Strome. You move on from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Note in the chat here from Jay Serio, Kyle Davidson has a close relationship with Frank Saravalli and leaks to him all the time. Now, I don't know.
Sure, maybe.
Unless you know Frank or Kyle, I don't know how you can just that's what it is. Frank has somebody in the Blackhawks. I think Emily Kaplan does too. Yeah. But you got to remember how many people in the organization know what's happening. Mm-hmm. There's a whole PR team. There are scouts. There are assistant GMs. There are assistants to the assistant GM.
There's 24 assistant GMs.
There's dozens of people that know the sort of things the Blackhawks are up to. Mm-hmm. And it takes one of them to have a close relationship with Frank Saravalli or Emily Kaplan or whoever to leak those stories to them in that way. I have sources. Mario's got sources. We all have sources. They all come from different places, but they all have the same information, right? Like it's an organizational discussion when these things come around. Like, for instance, if Kyle Davidson says to a scout, hey, I'd like you to really go focus on player X for the next 2 weeks, that scout can reach out to a source and say, hey, keep an eye on this guy. I know we're taking a look at him.
Right.
It could be that simple. Whether or not something comes of it remains to be seen. That's why you see a lot of rumors from sources who are plugged in and do really know not come to fruition. If they send their scout to go look at player X and the scout's like, he wasn't working real hard in the corners and just didn't like his overall game, cool. That's what scouts are for. That's why you have pro scouts. If a team's pitching a player to you and you don't have a great knowledge of the player, you send your scouts out to watch and you make your decision there. But it doesn't mean that talks between Team A and Team B about player X haven't taken place. They absolutely have.
Yeah.
So it's how it works. It's usually not Kyle Davidson calling Frank Saravalli and saying, we are trading for this guy.
No, if only it was that simple.
It's dot connecting, it's source connecting, it's kind of sifting through everything. And, look, a lot of people do have very high connections. Like when you see Bob McKenzie.
I'm sure NHL GMs have Elliot Friedman's phone number saved in their phone and talk to him frequently because there's also the dance of, hey, do you know what Team X is looking at? Because we might be talking to them.
Right.
And Friedman or Saravalli or Kaplan, They talk with their sources, which could be as high as a GM. It could be a scout. It could be it's agents. It's all an interconnection of networks that these sources come through and these reports come through. But if Kyle Davidson and Frank Seravalli are good buddies, sure, maybe. I don't know.
That's great for us because then the stories get out.
And you know what? Seravalli was pounding the table for Brandon Hagel trading, and we said, "Ha, that's dumb." Oh. And then he was pounding the table that Alex DeBrincat is getting traded. And we were like, huh, and there you go.
Yeah.
So he's connected some way. I don't know if it's Kyle Davidson, but he's connected some way for sure.
All right, we've got one more to do. Do you want to do...
yes, let's talk about FOCO here.
This last one's a big one.
FOCO is a new sponsor here with us at CHGO. They are joining us as your home for the best Chicago sports coverage, as they are a leader in sports merchandise and collectibles. Get access to the best collectibles and best gear around at FOCO, whether it's Bears, Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Bulls, whatever it is. With FOCO, you will have something for you, your kid, a friend, or a loved one. Looking to get some new gear, collectibles, or accessories, FOCO has officially licensed gear for men, women, and kids with everything from bobbleheads to swimsuits to Crocs and Birkenstocks. FOCO has got you covered with the best Chicago merchandise for your favorite team. Right now, head on over to FOCO.com. That's FOCO.com. Or click the link below in the YouTube description of this podcast. For all of the non-presale items, you can use the promo code CHGO, and you're going to get 10% off of your purchase. Again, that's FOCO, FOCO.com, and use the promo code CHGO.
All right, we've got one more question to get to. A reminder, if you want to get in on Mailbag Monday, it's never too early to email us, blackhawks@allchgo.com, or hit us up on Twitter. Those Twitter ones are usually better closer to the show because we can kind of curate them a little bit better. But we're at CHGO_Blackhawks, and, of course, on that All CHGO members-only Discord, you can get us there, too. Those questions get priority because you remember. All right, last one comes from Two Girls, One Puck. I don't pick the names. I just read what's on the screen. Have you read the latest tweets from Rick Westhead covering the Hockey Canada sexual assault investigations? 2 current Hawk players were part of that World Junior team. Is there a concern from the front office that they will have to go through yet another scandal? Look, I can't imagine the Hawks are seeing this thing and not being slightly concerned about it. Taylor Radish and Boris Kachuk were both on the Hockey Canada roster in that year. Now, I want to make sure we're very clear. We have zero indication whether or not either of those players were involved in this allegation. We're not going to share the details. They are horrific, as you would imagine. They're very easy to find. Rick Westhead, Katie Strang, the usual suspects are all over this story, as they are whenever these ugly things happen in hockey. Of course, the Hawks have to be concerned knowing 2 roster players that were not in the organization at the time were involved in this, potentially involved in this scandal. I have to say, too, and this is just, me personally, when this came out, it makes you think, what did Tampa know? If Radish and Kachuk came in the same trade, both guys were on the same teams, they've got a long history as being teammates together even before Hockey Canada. Did Tampa know something? Is it just a coincidence? I don't know. I really hate to speculate on something like this, especially something this serious. But, of course, the mind wanders, and, of course, I'm sure people in the front office are very, very itchy about what could potentially be coming out here soon.
Yeah, it's not a good look. If just to even have any sort of connection, whether it's a strong or loose one to this story, it's a very muddy story right now. Again, as Jay said, you can find out the information from Rick Westhead at TSN, Katie Strang at The Athletic. There was an article recently from globalnews.ca. Amanda Connolly, the author on this, had some information about the players connected that fit the description of the connection of players that may or may not have been involved in this. They said that the players were both playing in the CHL and played for Hockey Canada. So Kachuk and Radish both fit that description. regarding Boris Kachuk. This is from again globalnews.ca. The agent at Octagon Hockey for Boris Kachuk says that Boris fully cooperated with the Hockey Canada investigation and will continue to provide that cooperation in any further investigation. Regarding Radish, he is represented by Wasserman Hockey. Global News reached out to different agents that represent 6 players that have potential connections to this story by Wasserman Hockey. They released a statement on behalf of all 6 players denying that any of the players were involved of the alleged assault and that any further comment would not be made at that time, and that those players cooperated in the investigation with the local authorities in London, Ontario, Canada at the time of the investigation. I believe this was summer of 2018. So that's all we know regarding those 2 guys now, based on the statements put out by their representation. There have been some players that were potentially connected to this that have come out and said, I wasn't there, I was not involved, I do not know who was involved. A couple of players have come out and made public statements that way. So yeah, it's a very fluid situation right now. It is not a great look for the Blackhawks to be tied to it again. It's not a great look for hockey to have another incident like this.
Happens way too often, more than any other sport.
And we'll see how things transpire with this story. I hope that whatever the outcome is, that the victim can find some some solace to it. I know that this was a case that apparently was already settled once, but don't quote me on this. I don't know Canadian law very well or at all, but I believe that it is able to be reopened because of Hockey Canada is opening the investigation. I think that is the case. Again, don't quote me on that, but they are reopening the investigation, and this woman is cooperating and with the investigation, and major props to her for opening up that wound again in her life to get to the bottom of exactly what happened. That is not something I think anyone who has ever experienced anything like this wants to do, but hoping the best for her and the best outcome for however it gets resolved, that it's the best for the parties involved. And it's just another indication of the culture of not just hockey but sports, youth, junior level sports in general. It's young men not being held accountable. These things happen all too often, and it needs to stop.
And before we wrap up, I want to say too, I know that when these horrific stories come out, be it a mass shooting or a sexual assault or whatever, there is fatigue as a fan. There is fatigue as a civilian. There is fatigue, but you cannot tire of this. You cannot just forget that, you know what I mean? It's easy to push away and say, oh, I don't want to do a whole other summer of scandal. Of course, nobody does. But if it's presented to us, we have to do it. Yep. We can't just ignore it. We can't turn a blind eye to it. And Windy City Hockey says, should the Hawks just cut ties with them? The problem with the way the salary cap is structured is they can't really do that without incurring a penalty. Mm-hmm. You can't just cut a guy and walk away from him like the NFL.
If they are connected in a way that is criminal,
yes, I'd buy them out and walk away.
Yeah, you buy them out, because if you're saying, we want to save money, that's an awful, awful, awful excuse.
Right.
You buy them out, you take the penalty, you say, we can't have that around. I think this front office understands that a lot more than the previous front office, and I know ownership is quote unquote the same, but I think there is a different direction and a different moral value that this front office and the ownership group, as it has been reconfigured, is taking. And I think if that were to be the case, they would do what's necessary to move on from those players, if that ever were to be the case.
Yep, it was going to play out. It's about to pick up some steam. I've got some feelers out to some sources to see what I can find out, but these things it's not just a hockey trade. It's a legal case, so these things are tougher to get to the bottom of. So just be patient, be sympathetic to the victim.
And don't go vigilante doing your own investigation and trying to out who the victim is or out what players were doing what. Do not do that. Just let the people in charge of the investigation and in charge of disseminating the information do that. We don't need rumor bot 1000 saying ridiculous stuff on the internet and having that blow up and ruining people's lives or reputations or anything like that. It's just don't do that.
Yeah, and finally, I think too the Hawks need to just sort of let it play out too. I think cutting both those guys or buying them out today would be reckless. Because there is no evidence, at least that we're aware of. And now, if they get some evidence, then yeah, right.
If you give me a second, I believe Scott Powers did actually ask Kyle Davidson about this. Let me find the.
Okay. I'll remind everybody one more time that we are presented by PointsBet. Use that promo code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. Hate to end the show on this note. It's been really good, but again, it is what it is. Like, these stories are not going away. And if they're Blackhawk related, we have to pay attention to them. And right now, this is a Blackhawk related story until it's not.
Yeah. It's and to the point of feeling the fatigue and feeling, yes, I if I'm being honest, last summer and season was draining, mentally and even physically draining to go through as a fan of the Blackhawks and as someone who is a member of the media, and I don't say that to have a big head about it. I just, I've had jobs covering this team and talking about the news. It was tough to do that, and it pales in comparison to, the people who had to live through those things. But you have to do it. This is part of our job to talk about the news and to talk about the things that are important. And we're always going to address these things when they need to be, and you have to be able to kind of digest it, because it's a problem within sports that is coming to fruition way too often. And it's not the fault of, this information is getting out. That's not the problem. The problem is there's information to get out. There's still things like this happening. And we've talked about having Evan Moore on the show sometime this offseason. Him and Yashvina Shah, they wrote Game Misconduct, a book all about the problems within hockey and sports culture with racism and sexism and abuse and homophobia and all those things.
Yada, yada, yada.
We're working to get Evan on, and we're
soon.
gonna have that kind of discussion, and I really want to dive into it. I'm not finding.
I know you're looking for.
I'm not finding the Scott Powers thing, but it was one of those things where if you have the Athletic subscription, it's like a tweet that only subscribers can see. So I apologize to Scott.
We'll find it. We'll find it for tomorrow.
But he did. I believe he did talk with Kyle Davidson regarding Tkachuk and Radish's name being tied to this. And Davidson said that they are following the investigation. They are cooperating when they are asked to, and if anything comes of it, something will come of it. So
yeah.
So the team is aware. They are participating. They're following what they need to do, and I think that's all we really can know at this point.
All right, we're running late, but before we wrap up, Sean brings up a good point in the chat. I think people need to understand the nuance here. Though that with these players on the Hawks, it's far different than the scandal that happened under the Hawks' watch. So here's the deal with both of these things, Sean. It's the response. Anytime there are 100 people in an organization, someone will do something bad. It's going to happen. It is how the organization responds. And with the Kyle Beach situation, the response was zero. Less than zero. It was nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then the regime in place helped the assaulter.
Yeah. Brad Aldrich.
Brad Aldrich. They helped him find more employment. Okay? Yeah. So it's the response to the scandal Of course, the scandal itself is terrible, but if it turns out that either of these Hawks players were involved in this, buy them out, move on. It's over. That is how you respond. You respond immediately. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We had another big showing in the YouTube channel today. Reminder, if you've not already done it, to please hit that like button. We would greatly appreciate it if you do that. We'll be back Tuesday at 11 a.m. Joe Brand in studio with us for Top Shelf Tuesday. It's going to be a great time. Thank you to Kevin for producing the show today. We greatly appreciate it. We'll talk to you Tuesday at 11 on the CHGO Blackhawks podcast.